Hello, hello, everybody. So we are back for another career and spirituality conversation today. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Pone, and I support spiritual seekers having a career experience to reconcile what they do for a living with who they are as a soul. And today, to support me in having enlightening, interesting conversations about all this, I have the pleasure to have Simone Anzböck. How are you, Simone?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me, Julie.
Yes. I hope I pronounced your name properly. And before we start, let's have, as usual, a 1 or 2 minutes grounding together. So for everyone who's listening, if you can, close your eyes and allow yourself to feel the weight of your body on the earth, the weight of your body on your seat, the weight of your feet on the ground, and having an intention to be grounded, to ground yourself. And then bringing back your attention, your focus up into the chest area and more specifically into the heart. Let's imagine together that our breath are flowing in and out directly through our hearts. And let's take a few breaths deeper and slower than we usually breathe. And I'll count them for us. Let's do about 5 breaths. That's 5 long, slow breaths. So whenever you feel ready, you can all open your eyes again. And hello again, welcome back. So nice to have you here with us, Simone. I'm very excited to know about your journey. So Simone, for you guys who are listening, is an international coach, and she's been living abroad for over 20 years. And so she's discovered that there is no guardrails for making a life abroad, and she had to find that for herself, and her spirituality helped her with that. And now she's helping others to find that for themselves as well, people who are actually like myself too, who have expatriated themselves or have been traveling a lot in their life. So Simone, thank you so much for reaching out and suggesting that we're having this conversation. I'm delighted about that. And now I'm going to hand the mic to you, and with first wanting to know about your relationship, your approach to spirituality, or what does spirituality mean to you before we delve into your career path.
Just the easy questions at the beginning, isn't it?
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
The easy question, probably the whole conversation will be about that. Yeah, so spirituality for me, I think in my way, or how I have discovered it for myself, I think is really about connection and trust. Okay. And so connection and trust to both my own inner knowing and trusting my own inner voice and connecting to that, but also to that, I guess, to the universal energy, right? The energy that connects us, connection and trust in that a form of universal guidance. That's probably how I would define it, or how I have discovered it for myself, you know.
Yeah, I like that. So the both going, like the inward part and the outward part.
Yes,
Yes,
Correct.
yeah, I like that. Yes, I very much like that that definition. I can relate. And so, what's your career trajectory now? If we are delving into your professional path and how how it brought you to being a coach, working with international people, and of course how your spiritual discoveries have possibly interwoven and impacted your professional path.
Again, one where do we start? But I think I wouldn't start from my childhood, but I think the not feeling belonging into the family that I've grown up, and always feeling being different was kind of something that I struggled with for a very long time. So I don't want to necessarily go into detail of that, but I think that theme of not feeling belonging, looking for other things, and ultimately looking for those things abroad, is kind of what I think accumulated in my life of 20 years abroad, and also accumulated a lot of the kind of early years of what I, the kind of restlessness I had in my career. But basically, if you talk about my career, I've worked for the last 20 years in kind of international development. So I led programs mainly into international development, social impact space, worked a lot across Africa and Asia. And I did that brought me also to London, and I did that up to 2019. And then I decided in 2019 to move the first time for my partner abroad. So we relocated together. And that was, I guess, my first experience to say, okay, I'm not moving for myself, not for my own, for my own job, but for someone else. And that's completely unexpected, completely unexpected. This triggered a real identity crisis for me. And through that, and through my own years of kind of working with my own intuition coach and other coaches, I guess it opened up some kind of knowing. And I couldn't tell you the exact moment, but at some point I knew that I would do something different. And then through COVID, I started coaching. And that's, I guess, where I'm now, where I'm coaching other international professionals who feel at crossroads, and they feel that they cannot quite reconcile where they want to be with where they are, and then the whole complexity of, I guess, life abroad, as you will know, I guess. So that's what I did.
And so what was the difference between you when you initiated the traveling, or it was for your own professional journey, and this different occurrence that triggered an existential crisis?
I think you can connect the dots backwards, because when I moved abroad for myself, I moved abroad for even to countries like New Zealand without having a job. So it wasn't necessarily that I moved always for a job as the main thing. So I did move to countries and not having anything. But I think the difference was that you kind of give yourself up in the process, or you think you give yourself up in the process, because you move with your partner then goes to the work every day. You cut the ties, right? So you're in a new environment. You don't have a social circle yet. You don't have a professional network yet. And you basically get home all day, trying obviously to make it work, and starting the seeds and planting the seeds. But I think it's that shift in identity that's another reason, even though you choose yourself to move, that it wasn't self-initiated per se, if that makes sense. I don't think I can put words to it per se, because it was so unexpected. But I know since then, I've talked to many, that it's not an unusual experience, and that really surprised me.
Yeah, as you're saying, it reminds me, a sad story. A lady I had met in Paris who had a similar, traveling a lot, and on some of her last trips where she was following a partner, and she had a very serious depression, and she was trying to help others like that, but she didn't make it. So like the weight of I guess finding ourselves, or finding our own identity in a different place, or even after having traveled a lot, coming back to our own place, which might not feel like our place anymore. So I guess you have some interesting insights about around that. How did you navigate that? What helped you to get over the hurdle when it felt more painful than previously, etc.?
Yeah, and honestly, it was a coach, right? Like at that point, I think the difference for me was in that moment that because I had coaches before, that I knew there is someone that can help me, right?
Okay.
Whereas I see a lot of people going through phases like this and they don't know where to turn, right? They think it's just me, right? I guess we can relate to a lot of situations where we think it's just in my head or it's just me and it's me that's fault. So to answer your question, I knew that I needed external help to make sense of what's happening, that I wouldn't get out of it by myself. And that's when I turned to one of my former coaches to help me think through. And that's actually when I then found words for what was happening. You know, I didn't have the words for what was happening when I had the depression, as your story tells as well.
And so what, with the words that you found eventually, what do you understand now that was happening, and why do we sometimes possibly have that type of crisis?
I think, because, and that comes back to the whole spirituality, right? Like if the question of who am I and where am I? And a lot of the times we define ourselves by outside influences, like where we live, you know, the job we have, the roles we play, right? The roles we have defines a big part of our identity. And when you have such a change, when everything changes around, I mean, there's also the neuroscience or how the brain operates. Obviously, everything changes in here as well. Like your whole neural pathways have to change to adapt to a new place, right? Your kind of your own GPS. But coming back, I guess, to what changes in that situation is that, or what triggers it is that we look outwards and we don't have that strong, I guess, sense of, okay, I'm gonna be fine, it's me, you know, like there is a part of me that thrives, and there is a path for me here, right? Like there is something that will unfold. I don't know what it will be, but it will unfold. And because we don't know that, right? Yeah. And with nothing else is there, I think that's when that crisis happens.
Yeah. Is there something with lack of control or not having some familiar things that we can trust?
I think so many things, truly. I don't think it will be the same for everybody, but obviously lack of control, not knowing what comes else, probably a lack of social network for a lot of people, right? Like your relationships that are missing. Just maybe an inner trust about, you know, like, do you have a spiritual practice? Do you trust in what's will happening for you? Let's talk about society, the pressures we have in terms of being productive and, you know, like the career and, you know, like, you know, we need to move up or we need to earn money and need to be productive. So there's so many factors that play into it that comes down to conditioning, I guess, conditioning of what we expected and what we expect of us.
Yeah.
Does that relate? Do you have clients that have that sense or that that challenge when they come to you?
Yes. Yeah. Like certain, having that inner sense that, like you said actually earlier, that maybe they want to be a certain way, like, you know, they feel they want to express themselves or present themselves like they truly are, but the pressure of what is perceived to be as what's expected or what's demanded, like creates some sort of an inner conflict. So I see it with people, like changing work or with the work environment, but like you're describing it in a more expanded way that is not just, you know, it could be beyond work, the country that we're in.
Yeah.
So like it's totally different. Yeah. So like with the people that you are supporting, do you see patterns that are more, you know, in all of the factors that you've described, like, you know, is it something that is more frequent? Or
I would say the most frequent ones, like, so I work with international professionals, as we said before, so people that moved abroad to make a life abroad, and so they might have that sense of, okay, you know, I might be, in your case, Julie, from France, but live in Ireland, You know, I'm from Austria, I live in the UK. You're kind of in between. There's a belonging and not a belonging, right? So you're not really a native, well, I'm not really a native to the UK, but I'm also not really in Austria. And so there's that sense. And I think the ultimate, what I see with a lot of my clients is trusting your own path. Because if I look at my own circle, and maybe it's similar for you or similar for your listeners, if you look back at like your colleague, your friends from school or your friends from university, and you put them all in a row, they're all going to be somewhere different. Some will have houses with kids and others will be divorced. You know, certainly when you start being in your mid-30s, that's when it all happens, right? Like other people move abroad. So there's no one that can tell you, do it this way, right? Even though I think we probably would like to, maybe just tell me how it all going to turn out. But it's not going to be there, right? And I think that's the bigger struggle, you know, in terms of not looking somewhere else, but trusting and finding a way to, I call it trusting your life design. So trusting your own path, how your own path unfolds, what you bring and what you want, you know, and deconditioning from everything that other people might put on you or society puts on you or the country you live in or.
Yes, I like that. And do you have a sense that what do you think makes some of us want to start to travel or to change country in the first place, and some other people don't?
Oh my God, if I would know the answer to this question, Julie, I would probably win the Nobel Prize. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, do you have siblings?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Is he or she are they in France?
So she lives abroad as well. She lives in Portugal, but not for a while. Like I was the first one, actually the only one in my extended family who jumped took the leap and kind of went to work abroad. But at the time, for me, it was because I was working with horses at the time, and it was a difficult work situation. It was I wasn't happy in my work, there's moral harassment, whatever. And then it was making sense to do something in the same line of work, to at least change one element of it. Otherwise, I would just have been doing the exact same thing 5 kilometers away from where I already was, with very little difference. So if I wanted to kind of have more of a change, needed to be a little bit more drastic, and at least I would wanted to learn a different language. So that's why I moved to Ireland. And I mean, it's not a big, it's not like I've been going all around the world or like, on the other side of the world. It's only an hour and 15 minutes, flight. So it's not so much of a big, a big change. But so for me, that was the reason. So the first one, it was really like a work related, wasn't happy at work, needed a change. So what was it for you? What was the first insight?
Yeah, I mean, because I asked this question because I think maybe a lot of your listeners might relate to that's what you said, that, it's why certain people, why not others. And if I look at my family, then my brother is still in the same village where he grew up, and, and never wants, it doesn't have to thrive. He doesn't want to. And I'm the complete opposite, the kind of black sheep in the family that as soon as I was like 13, I wanted to go. So I think there are two things. I think there's probably an element of curiosity, adventure, growth, that like kind of probably values that we probably all have in common, or maybe more than stability, right? Like if I look at maybe my brother, maybe more that he values security and stability, maybe more than adventure and growth, right? So maybe if you look at it from a values lens, maybe we could do that. If I look at my own journey as well, I can only say that obviously now, when at the first time I moved to New Zealand after university, and obviously if you look at Austria and New Zealand, it's kind of like on the other side of the map, right? So I couldn't have gone any further. And now, almost 15 years later, I can connect the dots that at that time I was running away from my family system, I wanted to get away from, I guess, the jacket that was there, or that I felt was there. And that, again, the feeling of belonging or not belonging. I can make sense of that now. Obviously, at that point, when I made that decision, it was like, oh, I just got to New Zealand to have an adventure. Yeah. But if you are on your spiritual path, which all your listeners are, and you are, then over time you connect the dots, right? And over time you connect how some of what drives you, where that might have come from, and then you make peace with it, and then you decide, is this a life I want to lead? or do I go back to Austria? And in my case, the adventure is still there. So it's not anymore driven by it's not anymore driven by not belonging, but it's driven by that curiosity and that adventure and the life that I want.
Yeah, that's interesting. As you're talking, yeah, if I'm being honest, now that I'm thinking about it, there was more of there was a bit of an element of escape. Yeah, definitely escape from a work environment that was not ideal, with lots of entanglement. And funny enough, I laugh about it now, but at the time I didn't find it funny at all, is that when I thought I had turned the page and I arrived in Ireland, and I, in the matter of a couple of weeks, months, I ended up with the exact same people that I was running away from, but had moved as well. So I kind of, find myself in the exact same dynamics, so that was quite funny. But so like a lesson being like, if you don't address the problems where they are, no matter how far you go, it's like you're finding the same, same issues. So that was an interesting one. And yes, family, you're right too, like I tend to forget about that, but it definitely one positive aspect of having moved away is that it improved a lot some of my relationship with with family, with my mother in particular. So yes, there's stuff here if we dare if we dare to kind of have a look.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's part, in a way you could call it spiritual, or you could call that therapy, or however, which way you want to look at it. But yeah, I think some of the things are easier to see in hindsight, right? Or easier to see with someone else helping you.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, both both are great.
Both are good, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And what about that feeling? Because I think you mentioned it at some stage, and that's something I'm very familiar with, is that feeling of you're not really a native from the new place that you're in, but sometimes, and when you go back home, or like where we're from originally, then home doesn't feel like home anymore. What's your take on that?
I have found, hard. I should probably say, and so everybody who feels that, I think me and Julie, we hear you, I hear you.
Yeah.
Even now when I go home, my mother still says, "Oh, welcome home." And I'm like, I've been living abroad for 20 years. I don't think it's my home anymore. So, that tension, I'm not sure that ever goes away. And I talk to many people when I post this question, and I think that tension is always there. And I think there are two things I will probably say. One is, why does it need to be one home, right? Like, what if home is the transient place? What if home is, the collective of us that, that move. So you find home with the people, or, with people that have a similar path. And I guess the second part is like your inner home, right? So again, it's like, to give an example, since moving so much, right? Like I relocated a lot and I move a lot. And so there is not much space for a lot of items, right? So it's always about what can I let go of, and how can I move light, and all of this, right? So it's not, I don't find my home by having the nicest chair, or a specific brand in my home, or so it's, and for that you need to create it, and for that you need to kind of feel it, what is home for you, how do you feel in yourself, and then how can you make the environment that you are home. So I think there's also a journey that again comes with what we talked about before, with all this kind of spiritual path around how do you find that center in yourself that makes you sense, okay, yeah, I can make home wherever I go, and that's what I want. And there are challenges, completely a lot of challenges and trade-offs that you have to navigate, but is this what I want? And I'm confident with that, and I'm content with it.
Yeah, so it encompasses the expression, the saying, home is where we make it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not easy.
No,
let's just also acknowledge that, right? Moving countries a lot, or frequently, maybe some of your listeners do, that it's not easy to start again and make new friends and see people move, and
it's not easy. And I'm gonna add, like, it's not easy to leave, and sometimes once you've left, it's not so easy to to come back. And then because sometimes the people themselves that were such that are lifelong friends and who stayed sometimes, and I hear a lot of my friends that I've met abroad and who came back and had also sometimes like issues of understanding, like the friends that have never moved away, you know, different stages or different maybe values or maybe, yeah. So that's an interesting one. And as you mentioned, like, you know, that the inner home, in part of one of the tools that I'm using, you know, is doing these soul readings. You know, it rings a bell because there is one soul type that we, you know, encounter sometimes that's like anchored in unconditional love, and because they don't find unconditional love too much around, you know, on this planet, it's very, you know, love is very conditional here. So there is a longing for, there is a looking for something, looking for that quality of love. And so, and typically they would be, we describe them as sometimes traveling a lot because they're looking for that thing. So, and until they realize that this love, they can only find it within themselves, they will never feel settled and never feel at home anywhere. And so I'm not saying it's like, you know, like it neither yours or my type specifically, it might be for some people, but it reminds me of, I know there is a spiritual tool that you've said that you're using and that has been very helpful for you. So maybe it's an interesting segue into your use of this tool, which this human design you talked to me about.
Yeah, and I should probably disclaim that before that what we're talking about is something that I've discovered for myself and very much used on myself. Like I'm not, so it's human design we are talking about, and we can talk in a minute of explain what it is for people that might not know. But I guess a lot of people have heard of it. But I just wanted to say that I'm not a human design reader per se. It's really my experience with using it on myself and kind of the discoveries I had. Really helpful discoveries in lots of different ways, but I think how I came into it is on the journey of, you know, being full-time employed, and then now being self-employed and running my own business, and that whole conditioning that has happened for lots of reasons, but like that there's two very different ways of working, right? Very different ways of how you organize and energize yourself, and that's where it's been really useful. But we're diving right in, so maybe we want to take a step back and explain it maybe for people who.
Yes. Let's not assume that everyone knows about all the tools that we are talking about. So so like in a nutshell, so I know I'm a little bit familiar with it, but in a nutshell, can you tell us how to describe? In
a nutshell, how I would describe it is that human design is a system that's based on your time, date, and place of birth, and it's based on it's based on the principle that we all have a unique blueprint based on that and how we operate at our best.
Okay.
And so the question I maybe would ask you, you know, do you think, as a coach, obviously, as well, do you think that each person that comes to you has unique talents and gifts?
Yeah, well, I'm biased because I'm even though it's not human design, I'm also using like a framework where that helps us to unearth based on the type that we are. We have like certain gifts that come with it. So yes, I think that we have gifts, skills that we acquire, and there are innate gifts that are more inherent to our own essence.
Yeah. So yes, right. So that's kind of
the short answer is yes. Yeah.
Yes. No, and I love it. I mean, obviously, there's so many tools, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is the right one. It's the one. You know, I'm just saying it's a tool.
Yeah.
And do you believe that? So you have that, but do you believe that life conditions us? So that, you know, the parents we have, the family we're born into, the country we live in, the work we do. Do you think that conditions us away from that original?
Very much so, yeah. Or maybe if we are like, you know, if we've accrued good karma, maybe we end up eventually incarnating in an environment that is more and more aligned to who we are as a soul. But in general, it's rather that, you know, we arrive here and we forget. and we let ourselves be swayed by the pressures, the influences around, like you said, family, education, culture, society, etc. Yeah, totally agree.
So if I come back to how I would describe human design, then is that it's a tool to look at, not to say this is 100% me. It's a tool to reflect, and that's how I've used it, right? It's one tool that helps you just see, okay, what is maybe conditioning and what is maybe me. And for me, this was really useful in that transition, or in that phase that that I have been through the last 2 years, where, full-time employment, someone gives you a fixed paycheck, someone tells you what to do, there's goals and KPIs and OKRs and all of these, to, okay, you are a coach, and what do you want to do? How do you, so all of that, right? So it's kind of like a white canvas, and how do you feel that, and how do you organize your day? And obviously there's so much coming up, and when such a career pivot happens, or any career pivot happens, that we need to look at what's serving us and what doesn't serve us. And I found human design, for me, just a great tool to look at some of these things and help me to realize what's been conditioning and what's actually me.
So like a filtering tool.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess.
Like the bouncer at the entrance of the nightclub.
In a way, even though, it's one of the things where, like how there's MBTI and DISC profiles, right? And there's all these things that you look at this, and you do the tests, and the opposite, some of these are obviously scientific, and I'm not saying human design is not a scientific tool, but in the end, like, you look at it and go, oh yeah, that's, now that I read it, that's me, and so they're kind of helping you to really think through certain aspects. And there's certain aspects we could, I don't know if you're interested, we could talk about some of the learnings I had. It's quite, I wouldn't say that I can describe human design per se. It's quite, if you look at it, it's quite, the profile is quite complex. When it's not that you look at it and go, okay, these are the 5 things. There's so much in there. So you do need someone to explain you, what it means for you, and give you the kind of reading, I guess. That's what human design readers do. But certainly there's a few aspects that just sticky points for me, where, like, I wouldn't have come across this if I wouldn't have looked at my human design.
And tell me if you agree with this, because you mentioned some tests that we might be doing, like psychometric tests. I have a little bit of a theory of perspective that the psychometric test that we are doing by answering questions very much from our conscious mind, ourselves, we have to choose different kind of, to me, I find that it might actually validate, it might catch us at a time that we are very much within our conditioning, and somehow it could even validate parts of us, but the parts of us that are actually conditioned rather than what's underneath. And so that's why I like, even though they might not appear as sometimes scientific or as pragmatic, maybe tools that rely more on an energy reading or something based, like a human design, you said, is based on your date of birth, etc. Like, so like the one I'm using, it's also like, and like based on date of birth and more of an energy reading type of thing. But I feel like those might have a better chance to identify underlying, or more of the truth of who we are, like be underneath the conditionings, because it bypasses us giving answers, answering questions. Because when we do that, we are using our conscious mind, and like basically, in our possibly conditioned version. So I wonder, what do you think about that?
I mean, that's where, that's where this is a conversation about spirituality, right? Because my very practical and down to earth brain is like, it's like, how is this possible? How can this human design that I'm looking at, like, that doesn't know anything about me other than my date and place of birth, actually be accurate in that sense? Like, it feels true, right? Like, it feels like, I can see instances where this is true or was true in my past, right? And I can actually feel that feels really good if I lean into this, right? If I try to be more, do more that way, right? And then it's a chicken and egg situation, right? Like, you read something that oh yeah, I can imagine this. Yeah, let's do that, right? Like, then it happens. So it's like what comes first, right? Like the idea that, you know, you like something and then you do it because you read it and you liked it, or because it's true, right? That's where I'm not saying that I have. That's where my mental brain is still figuring out some of the spiritual elements. I have to say, but it's certainly, you know, it's certainly something to look at and go to explore, right? Like be curious about it, and look at it and just take what might be helpful, especially if you are in a phase of transition where you think, you know, where maybe more input might be helpful to help you come to clarity.
Yeah. Well, I guess any, like, you know, I'm not trying to be, I don't want to sound judgmental towards one type of, you know, test. I think any of them that help us to understand ourselves better is great. And the one that I'm using it because it was used on me first. And like you said, okay, chicken or the egg, where is it coming from? What convinced me at the time is that the answers that I got firsthand, I wasn't happy with them. I'm like, oh no, I don't want it. Like, you know, among all the types, you know, that I could have been, I'm like, I don't want to be like this. I want to be that other one. And I was trying to live my life being that other one. It wasn't working very well. And so it was a case of it pointed out, like, really some aspects of who I really am in my own nature that I had really buried deep. And I sort of, I think I knew that this was right, but I didn't want it to be. I didn't like it. So, but eventually when I accepted to, you know, start to act a little bit more, or like I, you know, like I had been pointed out, was more like me. And only when I accepted to do that, I started to feel into it and realize that, yes, of course, you know, that's the me that I had been running away from. So I didn't start doing this because I liked it on paper. I actually didn't like it on paper.
Interesting. Well, interesting way then to come around to what made you then try.
Yeah. So for you, it's the opposite. For you, you liked what you heard, right?
So it kind of, I would more say, maybe I need to give you an example.
Yes.
It made more sense. So for example, there's an element of there's a lot of elements of your designs, right? I'm not going to try to give names to it because, again, I think it will confuse people. But so there's an element of your design where you might be a type that, in my case, gets lots of different new ideas. Like basically lots of information comes in, right? Let's say, you know, in your head, lots of information comes in, or you may be more closed in the sense that it's, you're not as open. And so in my case, like I'm one of those people, lots of ideas come in constantly. Like my head is a constant mess of new ideas, inspirations, words, texts, like it's all there, right? And it manifested in my earlier years as a constant restlessness, right? This constant sense of, you know, I need to make this happen, or, you know, what about this? And, you know, like, because it was so full, there was so much coming in. And so there was always felt this was the truth, you know, everything that comes in is the truth. And when I learned that that's just the way I operate, and not everything that necessarily might come through me might be worth acting on, I now know it's okay, you know, like I have a way of like saying, okay, I just write everything down. Like, you know, I write all the ideas down that I have, or I take it all in, and I'm like accepting that that's the case, without feeling overwhelmed by the fact of like, oh my God, that's, you know, like, what is it? You know, like, what do I do with this overwhelm of like, okay, I need to do this, or I need to act on it. So it's kind of like, it helped me to kind of see how I operate in a way, you know. So that's one example that really helped me to realize. And in a business, if you run your own business, Julie, you might recognize this, right? If you have constantly like all these like 100 different things that you should be doing, right? And you realize, and then you see, okay, maybe that's just how it is. Like this stream will always be there, right? It's there because that's how I'm wired, right? Okay, how can I accept that I don't have to act on everything? Not everything that's there is gonna be important. Find a way to manage it, but not get attached to anything that might come through. And that's been immensely helpful.
Yeah. So what I hear as well is like it's allows to understand who you are without making yourself wrong for being a
Oh,
certain
completely.
way. Yes. Yeah.
It's not that at all, actually. It's kind of like this, it's almost like, for me, human design is in the subtle things. Like, let me give you another example. Like I always, like now it can make sense, but I always had a very strong sense of direction. Like I remember the moment with, like, I think I must have been 5 or 6. So my parents are farmers, so I come from a farming family, and so we had a farm, and you know, like generations of my parents were farmers. So obviously you are a small child, you go, well, maybe I should be a farmer too, right? But I remember that moment, I was 6 years old, and I would go into the cow shed, and I would go in there and I would smell the cows, and I go, no, I'm never good. Like I knew this with so much certainty with 6 years that this is not my path, right? And the same with like whether or not I want to go to university. I knew like there was annoying, and this is so many other things. Obviously, a lot of the times in my career, in my life, that knowing was buried with over questioning and indecisiveness, and why I know this, but like that doesn't make any sense, you know, like a lot with terms of moving and taking certain jobs abroad. And now through my human design, I know that that's how I'm meant to be. Like I have a very strong sense of direction. And even though other people tell me, you know, would be better for you, I can't trust my own sense of direction.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, it's just there without me necessarily having to explain it. And so there's certain, it gives a certain, I would, for me, it's really conditioning versus deconditioning. Like, what are certain things that you might be conditioned on? And if you know this, it gives yourself trust, and you allow yourself to play with that a bit more and say, okay, if that's true, what would that mean?
So allowing ourselves to be that little different from maybe the norm, or maybe what the outside tell us how we should operate.
And and there's I should also say, if people think it's not like astrology, because when I say human design, oh my god, there's astrology, there are 12 types. It's, oh my god, I mean, I don't know how many types there will be, like, because of the combination of everything that shows up. Like, I have not, you know, when I did my own reading, I went into this group where there's other people who got their reading, and everybody showed their profile, and I think there were like 100 people in the group, and there was not one that had the same profile as someone else, right? So it is in the details, and so that's where it's hard to just look at it and go, oh my god, I'm a Gemini. You know, that's not, it's not like that. It's not that kind of system.
Yeah, as you're talking, it doesn't put you in a box. It opens up possibilities rather than categorizing us yet in another in another series of boxes.
And wouldn't you say that's true with everything? Like if you take if you just say take the Myers-Briggs profile, right? Like some people say, okay, I take that, and you know, I learn a bit from it, and others says I'm that, right? So the categorization of whether or not you take on the box, whether you, that's individual, isn't it? Like, you know, that probably comes from a different element altogether. Again, looking maybe for someone else to tell you rather than validating it for yourself. And I guess isn't that ultimately what spiritual tools give us, or any tools give us, is about validating, you know, validating in for yourself. Does it feel true? What about that feels true? What about that helps me get to know me better? You know, to really find out how you are wired, right? And how you can express yourself in the most authentic and intentional and conscious way.
So understanding ourselves better, so we can navigate our decisions better.
Decision making, how we create opportunities, how we work best. So in the sense, how we work best is like, you know, like how people, how you might be dressed, right? Like, you know, are you someone who can go on like a Duracell bunny? I don't know if you know this Duracell.
Oh yes.
You might not have had them in France. I'm not sure if any listeners in the UK or Ireland know about them, but you know, if you can go on like a Duracell bunny and just like need the energy, or whether you work in bursts and you need, you know, you need more space, all of that, right? There's quite a different, you know, your profile is completely different to mine, and it's really about that's allowing that, right? Allowing yourself to show up.
And so for our viewers who might not yet have a tool like that, what would you advise? Like, let's say in the absence of tools, how can we reproduce or like start to get a sense of that? Would you have some advice?
In the absence of tools, I think, well, probably two things. One is an inner practice, in a sense, stillness practice, inner practice, learning to listen to your own voice, right? That's always there, right? I mean, you asked me at the beginning what spirituality is for me, right? And a big part of that is trusting my own intuition. And what is intuition? Intuition is a voice, right? An inner voice. For some people, it's just in my case, I just know, right? The knowing just comes. Other people hear voices, you know, and other people see things. So intuition shows up in different form, not to be confused with the critic, right? The person that tells you what's wrong.
So
I mean, not to confuse with the inner critic, right? The one that tells you how bad, you know, what is wrong and how you're not, right? So I'm talking about the sage voice, the voice that guides you, right? And that's a practice, right? Because that's where the knowing comes, and that needs space and time, in a sense of like, you can't do that on, you know, on a 7 o'clock rush hour train in the middle of with 100 other people, right? So you need to find a way to develop a stillness practice. That's probably what I would say. So the inner practice, and the other thing is probably, if it's maybe more talking about, let's say, how you work best, how you use your energy, it's listening to your body a bit more, you know, and what does your body tell you? I mean, the mind-body connection is something that's been researched now, right? That I certainly know people in my family that operate very much mind, and they don't feel the body, right? So they, you know, how this manifests is high pain threshold, right? Because you don't feel pain, because you are disconnected from the signals your body sends you. So mind-body connection is a big one, and your listeners can do some research on that. There are books about how you can practice that, like a full body scan. Have you heard of that before? Doing a full body scan, for example. Probably there are YouTube videos. So it's also that, listening to what does my body tell you, and specifically about fatigue and energy, and what my body needs, nourishment. There's a lot of knowledge we have that we're not listening.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yes, it's easy. Like we're so stimulated. Our minds are so stimulated all the time. It's easy to live in that realm and forget that the body is like, I mean, you're talking about intuition. I mean, what an amazing tool to perceive. Yes. Yeah. And so, Simone, I know like we're getting closer towards the end. So
really?
Yeah. So like, I know you also, you know, want to be respectful of your time. We still have time, but so that's why I want to open up actually with a question that's not a question, but is there something that I haven't asked you that you would love to address?
I don't think so. I think the conversation flowed really nicely. I really liked where it went, you know, how the questions you asked. We talked about, you know, intuition, we talked about spirituality. So yeah, I mean, if at this point I probably say, is there an audience question, but there is no audience that can
there is so actually, so let me ask you one more then. In all of your travels and everything that you've taken from your different moves, what has struck you as something that you're cherishing most of this learning of moving abroad so much?
Oh, interesting. It's it's weird for some people, I think, but I do really enjoy that part at the beginning when you come to a new country and you have to figure it all out, you know,
Yeah.
like you don't know how the things operate. And I don't know, you don't know where the supermarket is, and you know, you need to put your house together again, and you meet new people and all of that, you know, and then the language learning is something I really enjoy. So it's weird. I started really enjoying I even light up when I do it. Like there is a real excitement about that, you know, that adventure of like moving to a new place. And the other thing, I think that's something that came on more recently, certainly over the last 2 years, with the last move, is like I really cherish letting go of things now. Like the minimalism, I guess is the word. How to live less of things. That's one thing, obviously, right? How to live less of things in the small things, like, you know, clothes and you know, kind of the furniture you have, but also just less noise, you know. So, and I think it started with the probably more physical thing, because obviously if you move, you kind of, you know, like, okay, do you need this? Every time you move, you look through your house and go, I haven't used this in 2 years, so maybe we should let it go. And obviously moving is expensive, so you kind of want to be contained. But I think it created something that goes beyond that now in my head, that I'm like, that it branches out in other areas, right? Like less work. I mean, that's a big one, you know, like using my time more for other things. So there is a development happening for me that is in minimalism that goes beyond the clothes and the items, I would say.
Yeah. So getting, what I hear is like constantly stripping off the superficial and staying centered on the basics of not just what you have, but who you are, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to summarize it of my extended explanation. Yeah.
Oh, Simone, that's awesome. Yes, I really enjoy our conversation, because obviously I haven't traveled as much as you have, but I can relate to a lot that you've described. And also, yes, when you say like you got that joy or enjoyment of figuring a new country out, that probably ties in with some of the skills or gifts that you realized you had through when you started to discover your human design as well. Right?
Yes, interesting enough. Yeah, I've not made that connection, but yeah, it's true. One of my gifts is that I can make things happen very quickly for me and for other people. And so I guess there is a joy, there's probably an innate joy in that, you know, because it's a gift of mine. So I love that. In moving at speed, I guess is maybe the word. I never thought of that connection until now. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm delighted. Oh, awesome. So thank you so much, Simone. If there is any last words that you want to share, but otherwise I will make sure that people know where to find you. And so your LinkedIn profile for sure. If there is anything else that you will want to share, I'll make sure to throw it in so people know, you know, and I'm strongly advise people who might be in this moving different country, difficulty to find yourself, and that when you're adding that dimension of expatriation, to contact you, because you're really specialized in helping people in this dimension. So, and it is important to have that support. So thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you, Julie.
And to everyone else, thank you for staying with us. And I shall say, see you next week for another career and spirituality conversation. I love you all. Ciao.